Hello and welcome to Gardeners World. It doesn't matter what you grow or how you grow it. The simple act of gardening is something that we can all enjoy. Gardening is more than just tending the soil and growing plants. It can also enrich our lives in many ways. And today we'll be looking back at some of our seasonal highlights, celebrating the benefits of gardening and its power to both connect us to nature and to nurture ourselves. Coming up on today's program, Joe meets a couple who have seamlessly blended their British and Brazilian roots to create a lush urban garden.
I'm from the middle of the country where it's dry throughout 6 months and then rain non-stop. And having the fresh water softening the gravel and the harshness of it was a massive element to remind me of home.
We visit a grower in Whitby who's traded his career as a sales manager for a more fulfilling life in the garden.
I feel there's something quite profound in taking a seed to a plant and then a plant to a crop and then maybe taking seed from that plant and then replanting it and seeing that whole process.
And Rachel learns more about the incredible ways that plants have evolved to draw in pollinators.
They include anti-slip petals, heat mats, and turbo-boosted nectar. And that's just for starters.
There are few activities that can achieve all that gardening can. As well as being good for our health and bringing us close to nature, it can also evoke memories and deepen our sense of connection. And back in July, Joe visited a garden in Walthamstow that combined all of those things and more besides.
The garden was designed by its owners, Paula Siqueira and Andrew Durham, who knew just what they wanted.
What a beautiful garden.
Aww.
Honestly, it's absolutely gorgeous.
So we wanted it to be low maintenance because we don't have time to weed, to water. So laying the gravel is the major part of it, you know. We also wanted a place where we could relax and remind me at home as well, because I'm from Brazil.
Okay.
And we obviously wanted it to be a mix between British culture and Brazilian culture. I'm from the middle of the country where it's dry throughout 6 months and then rain non-stop throughout 6 months. And having the fresh water softening the gravel and the harshness of it was a massive element to remind me of home.
So Andrew, what was the garden like when you first came here?
Well, straight away, we fell in love with this space. We had maybe 8 trees here. Quite a lot of them were in bad shape, but it had also some beautiful elements like this amazing wall of ivy. It's such a great element to have.
Not only did they design the structure and the planting, they built most of the garden themselves too, with a lot of graft.
Now, looking back, I think it's like giving birth. You don't remember how much work and pain it was. Right?
The garden is long and thin, 7 meters by 29, and cleverly divided into areas. But the water near the house is key.
One of the things that Paula and Andrew inherited was this large pond, and I guess most people would think, I'm going to get rid of that. It's a bit scary to maintain, but it adds so much to this garden. It's absolutely beautiful. But also the water, they don't fill it up from the tap. It all comes off the roofs and they harvest it, and it's all natural water going into this pond. They've divided it into 2. There's a really deep part on this side, and on this side it's much shallower with gravel and marginal plants. And also it's a beach, so it's great for wildlife too. And the wildlife is just flocking here. There's damselflies, there's dragonflies, and on these reed maze over here, a lot of people call them bulrushes. They're the casements of the old dragonflies that have emerged and flown off. And honestly, this is just so magical to have this in your garden in the centre of London on a day like this. It's fabulous. At the beginning of this project, a lot of trees were taken away. Well, left on site actually, but reinvented as habitats and places to sit and dotted around the garden. But new trees were put in, and trees much more appropriate for a smaller garden. Here, I love this mini sort of stylised birch grove. We've got 3 trees set out in a triangle, and as they grow, they'll grow together as one nice big clump. And when they drop their leaves, of course, in autumn, you've got these wonderful white stems, a really lovely composition. And from a design perspective, they're important too, because on this side, we've got that large ivy, we've got the olive as well. And without these here balancing the garden out, it would all feel very lopsided.
There's not much colour in the garden. The interest comes from the texture and shape of the fabulous planting. But there's one central bed. It's actually the old pond that was filled with recycled garden rubble and soil, and it sits beautifully in this simple but clever space.
There's a lovely continuity to this garden, and I think that's because there's just 2 materials used throughout, really. We've got timber and gravel. So we've got this deck and these lovely floating sleeper steps. And the railway sleepers are cut into random sizes and dotted through as stepping stones through the path. It creates a lovely meandering feel through the garden. And as with all garden design, the detail will take good design and elevate it to an excellent design.
And there's one last experience here I just can't resist.
Oh, this is beautiful, I've got to say. And to think this is low maintenance, it's environmentally friendly, buzzing with wildlife, and it's beautiful too. They've achieved so much in this small garden, I've got to say. And you can cool yourself down on a hot day. What more do you want?
One of my earliest memories is of crawling under the strawberry net in my parents' garden and gorging on the strawberries. Well, I still love strawberries, and they're much easier to grow here, actually, on the rich Herefordshire soil than they were on the Hampshire chalk that I grew up on. Because strawberries really need lots of nutrition. They like plenty of water, plenty of feed, and a good rich soil is great for them. If you can grow good potatoes, you can grow good strawberries. There are 2 wide rows of strawberries that are now coming into their 2nd full year, and this is their peak production. Nice and healthy, but it won't be ripening yet because there's lots of foliage cover. This double row here, there's not near the same foliage, so the fruit, of course, has got more sun, so this is ready for a little bit of picking. Now, if I'm honest, I can't remember what variety these are, but with strawberries, blackbirds are by far the biggest problem we have here, and the hint of ripe fruit, and they're on them. So we do put netting over them. Of course, now we can all buy strawberries every month of the year, but what you can't do is buy that unique seasonal flavour that you get from growing your own. Because when you buy strawberries, they are mainly chosen for their ability to travel and store. Whereas very often strawberries from the garden only keep for about 24 hours. And a warm strawberry on a summer's evening with a glass of either something bubbly or slightly fruity is one of life's great pleasures, and which really only can happen in June or July from the garden.
Now, I've been growing fruit and veg all my life, But we went to North Yorkshire to visit Jamie Walton, who'd recently made a big change in his life by taking on a kitchen garden.
I'm Jamie, I'm head grower here at Raithwaite Sands End. Growing seeds, being out in the garden, being out in nature, has definitely changed the way in which I live. Much more peaceful, I suppose. Gardening's definitely changed my perspective on everything, really. I was a sales manager that went to business school, was a very different person at that point. So I swapped the suit for a fine art studio. I was inspired a lot by the natural world, and that then led me into a collaboration with a garden designer for one of the RHS shows, and I did some of the murals, and he did obviously the garden design, and that was my kind of first foray into gardening. So the kitchen garden is around 900 square metres in total, 3 50-foot polytunnels. It's on a north-facing hill, about 30 degrees. We still grow a large variety of things that you wouldn't necessarily grow, like Aztec broccoli, tons of different varieties of tomato, courgette. We try and grow interesting varieties that you wouldn't necessarily find in a shop. The garden was set up with the soil health as the kind of primary concern. And because of that, the best way I know of to cultivate healthy soil is utilising the no-dig method. That process, essentially, you would mulch the ground with a medium such as compost, and you wouldn't till it into the soil. You just add a mulching layer, which then feeds the soil life, and then in turn the soil life help feed the plants and create a symbiosis with them, which is what we're aiming to cultivate. Just over a year ago, this entire hill was just a muddy lawn, essentially. So it's a pretty young garden, and we've only been set up about a year, and we've definitely had challenges throughout that year. But I think, all in all, I'm pretty happy with how the season's gone and what we've managed to produce. So this is horizontally, or Aztec broccoli, and it's slightly different to its namesake, broccoli, because it's far more prolific. It originates from Mexico, and it was used by the ancient Aztecs as a ceremonial plant. It's one of those plants that you can just pop in and not really have to worry about. No pests seem to like it. I haven't found one that likes it. The more you pick, the more you get. As it matures, it turns red, and the leaves turn red as well. Both the seed heads and the leaves are edible. It's kind of like a cross between spinach and broccoli. But the leaves are far more robust when they're cooked than spinach. So all in all, it's a great plant that I would definitely recommend growing. So prolific, and no pests like it, so that's always a plus in my book. So we've really struggled with wireworm this year, and that's because we've essentially mulched out that grass layer, and click beetles, which is the adult, they lay their eggs within lawns or dense vegetation, and then you cover that over with your mulch layer. And when the larvae hatch, they're called wireworms, and the only thing that they have to eat is the roots that you're planting, because you've mulched away the roots of the vegetation underneath. So you don't actually know you've got a problem until your plant's dead and gone. So there's a couple of things you can do. The easiest thing is a decoy or a trap crop, something like a radish, which is fast growing, or just popping in potatoes around the area. If it's really, really bad, just sow the mustard thickly in the bed, let that grow, and then incorporate it just in the top layer of the soil. So I love growing carrots, but they can be quite tricky to get to germinate and to grow. And then once they're growing, a common pest problem is carrot root fly. So I found that if you interplant carrots with onions, because the onions have a stronger scent, they actually mask the scent of the carrots. So I haven't had an issue with carrot fly once because of that. So let's try harvesting one. A quick tip that I've learned is that if you push your carrot down, it kind of breaks the airtight seal around your carrot and saves you snapping them. And I've learned that through a lot of snapped carrots. Quite a nice carrot. So one of my favourite aspects of being in the garden is obviously harvesting. I feel there's something quite profound in taking a seed to a plant, and then a plant to a crop, and then maybe taking seed from that plant and then replanting it and seeing that whole process. So this is one of my favourite tomatoes I've grown this year. Blue Fire Vine. Starts off deep blue and then ends up this kind of reddy, purpley colour with golden stripes. It's a really attractive tomato and it's also very tasty, which always helps. So we have our leek flower heads here. The flowers have now turned to seed, more or less. Leek seed is one of those things you have to be quite patient for. It takes 2 years to be able to save seed from leeks. They're lovely big pom-poms on big stems and the pollinators love them. They can't get enough of them whilst they're in flower. I think that leeks are sometimes undervalued. I love growing leeks because they're great to eat, but also they're very ornamental in the garden in the second year. It's also like a little maraca in the garden if you give it a shake. Hear all those seeds rattling around. So this is quite an interesting one. This is actually a cucumber, believe it or not. Not your standard cucumber, but it's a lemon cucumber. Texture is very similar to a standard cucumber, although the seeds are slightly larger. And it has these slight hairs that I usually rub off before eating. But it's actually a birthless variety, so if you struggle to digest cucumbers, this one's a good one for you. And a harvest basket wouldn't be complete without a few edible flowers. So we've got some nasturtium in there. And this is our late summer harvest from here on the northeast coast. Pretty happy with that harvest. It's been a very challenging location, a very challenging kind of garden setup, but that extra challenge adds to the sense of achievement, I suppose. I just try to steward it the best way I can, and yeah, I'm really proud of it.
I have to confess that Aztec broccoli was a new one on me. But one thing that I do grow every year is sweet corn, and the seeds can be sown indoors from the middle of April.
Sweet corn is a symbol of summer, if anything is. This is a variety called Swift, which is fairly early to crop. It doesn't have the biggest cobs, but they're very sweet and delicious. And you can see the seeds are really big and easy to handle. So just push one in, like that. Use plugs rather than the seed tray, because sweet corn are big plants with a fairly long root. There we go, pop those back in there. And I will cover these over lightly with a little bit more compost. The vermiculite would do the job just as well. Level that off. A label. Now, they do need at least 20 degrees in order to germinate. If you're putting them on a windowsill, make sure it's above a radiator. If you've got a greenhouse, that's great. If you've got a propagator, best of all. Obviously, water them and keep them watered, and they will germinate in about 7 to 10 days' time. Let them grow on, and in about 3 weeks' time, they could be potted on into individual pots. And you know they're ready, and this is all to do with the timing, is when you can just push out one of the plugs and the soil is held together by the roots. And when they're about a foot or so tall, they'll be ready to plant out, which normally will be the end of May, beginning of June.
Come the summer, they'll be ready to harvest.
You can tell by looking at the tassel. If it's still green and pale, then the cob isn't right. But if, like this one here is a good one, if it's dark and has browned off, then the chances are it's ripe. And if I break this off, and when you pick them, the way to do it is just to break them. So if it should just break off in my hand like that. And if we open it out, now look at that, Ned, look at that. The beauty of sweet corn grown at home is that it does have that extra edge of sweetness. And personally, I like them best just boiled, slathered with butter, and then eaten, and just don't worry about the mess, just enjoy it.
Back in the summer, Adam displayed his passion for growing edible plants with a show garden at Gardeners World Live. And his design was inspired by the idea of a chef reclaiming a patch of wilderness to grow food.
What a lovely place to be in. And here it is, the garden in its full glory, and it's stunning. Now, Adam's idea of this chef who's reclaiming wilderness and turning it into a garden has really worked beautifully, and this is the wilderness that's still left. It's lovely. And the nut trees and the apple trees that run through this orchard are really stunning, especially with the beautiful spring edged with logs. I really like that. And I like that he's kept it, this imagined space of wild beauty. But then you come into a much more cultivated space than I was actually expecting to see. Clearly, this chef knows what he's doing. The shrubs that are underplanted with herbaceous perennials, but also interplanted with things like kale, chard, there's Korean mint, there's normal mint, there's all sorts of edibles in amongst this, and it's beautifully executed. It is a proper garden. But there's something over there that I really wasn't expecting to see. These picking paths are straight lines, and there are vegetables in straight lines as well, all planted in rows in this part of the garden, and I really wasn't expecting that. It's really nice though, because it gives this proper vegetable garden feel here, and then you move slightly more into garden spaces behind me, so it's a garden of many sections, and yet they all hang together really, really beautifully. Well, how has it been?
It's been an absolute joy, honestly.
Really?
Yeah.
Not stressful?
No.
I think it's amazing. I love the whole blend of edibles and ornamentals anyway, because edibles are ornamental.
But also, when you walked along my little path,
Yeah.
did you see a certain plant just tucked away there?
I can see it now.
Go on.
It's a Vietnamese coriander like I gave you all those years ago.
So there we go. So that was for you.
I appreciate it. It's a beautiful plant though, don't you think?
And as you're planting it, you're shaking it and getting it in place. And I was...
The smell.
Yeah. So I'm going to re-engage. I'm going to give it a go.
Okay.
But probably just when I'm cooking less leaves.
That's it, I think. But you're the cook, you know. I'm not a very good cook, and I've always overdone it. But I've come to that conclusion as well with the Vietnamese coriander.
Ah, bless you. But no, it's been really lovely, and I just hope everybody turns up and enjoys it.
I'm sure they will.
These are 4 new cut flower beds. The fact that they're raised beds means that we can create good drainage. And we've done that by putting rubble in the bottom of each one, and then soil, and then we've added quite a lot of grit. And you can see that it's very loose, friable soil. And that is great for developing a good root system, because when you're growing cut flowers, it doesn't matter so much if the plant itself is not as big as you necessarily might want it if it's in a border. It's the flowers above all that we want. I've got 3 different annuals here. This is a tray of cornflowers. It's called double black, lovely, rich, burgundy colour. So I'm just going to plant them out in a row. Just enough width so they can be nice, strong plants. And the only thing that you do need to make sure when you're growing cut flowers, particularly in a raised bed like this, which drains, is that you're fairly near a water supply, because they will need watering, particularly if it gets hot and dry. Right. I have sown lots of cosmos, but none of them are ready for planting out, and they won't be for about 2 or 3 more weeks. So I've bought a few. Now, when you're growing cosmos, what you're looking for is nice bushy plants. They do have a tendency to get leggy. So if they're leggy, just pinch out the tops, and then they'll get bushy, and then you'll have lots of side shoots and therefore lots of flowers. And the other thing about them, which really matters, is that they need to be regularly picked or deadheaded. And then they will go on producing flowers into autumn. But if you leave them, then they go to seed, and that's not what you want at all. Now, back to my own seedlings. This is Ami majus, and they make a brilliant cut flower. They're quite tall. They're one of my favourite plants, in fact. It's quite late in the year to sow Ami majus, but you could try sowing Ami visnaga. That responds better to a later sowing. So much for annuals. But of course, anything that's going to provide you material that you want for decoration indoors counts as cut flowers. That could be stems, it certainly could be foliage, and it can be flowers from any type of plant. And in fact, I've got some dahlias here. This is a variety called Totally Tangerine. And in fact, my plan is to fill this particular bed entirely with dahlias. 2 more of the Totally Tangerine, which will go at the end. So that will go there, and that there. And later on, I've got herbaceous perennials to put in, as well as lots more annuals that are coming from seed. But let's get these in the ground. I'm not sure this will be man enough to dig a hole, but we'll try. Because these aren't going to live in here, I will lift them in the winter. They don't need to be planted too deep. Just in the last month, they've grown really good roots. So I can put that in like that, and that will be perfectly happy.
Last April, we went to Glasgow to meet a mother and daughter who find that flowers and floristry connect them to something much deeper than just their bond with each other.
I've spent a long time working with flowers. I never get tired of seeing how happy people are when they're given flowers. If our flowers can bring some sort of a memory, joy to that person, I never get tired of that.
I grew up in a flower shop, and flowers have always been incredibly important to me. Flowers themselves and flower arranging as an act is a really beautiful way to go into a deep thinking space, and that space of meditation and calmness is quite rare to find.
I'm Lucina Curry.
And I'm Lauren Printy Curry. And this is my mum.
We love working together. I actually don't even think about it. You know, we just come in, we work, we go out, we sing, we're quiet, we listen to the birds when we're in the polytunnel. We just work away.
We have a lot of fun.
Well, my path into floristry was through my mum and dad. My mum and dad had a grocery shop, and my dad wanted to introduce some flowers to it. And I went to college. My dad taught me to go into the market and, you know, how to buy. And I've got to thank my mum and dad for it.
I did take a different path because I've always been a very creative person. I wanted to be an artist. I went to art school and I studied sculpture, and I worked as an exhibiting artist for around 10 years. I got married in 2018, and my mum and I decided to do the flowers ourselves. And we were looking for garden-grown flowers and realised they were quite hard to come by, and they certainly couldn't be purchased at the wholesale flower market. So we sourced flowers from my aunt's garden, my grand's garden, my own garden, my parents' garden, and it was a real revelationary moment just to how powerful these things are and how much more meaningful than anything else you could ever buy that was manufactured.
We have been here 24 years. It's always been our home, so it feels really, really even more personal because it is our home and the connection that we have to the land.
Our ethos is to grow all of our own flowers. So this is Sweet Rocket, which is quite a typical cottage garden flower. You can see it growing wild around here as well. It has really tall stems with clusters of white or lilac, very highly scented flowers on the top. So yeah, we definitely do look to things that are not commonly seen in floristry and are more commonly seen in gardens.
The conditions here where we are is very bleak. We're very exposed to wind, rain. We're very high up above sea level. Very dreich days that we have here. So yeah, we get hit with a lot and it, you know, but we work with it.
When I'm cutting flowers, I am looking for anything unusual in terms of bend of stem or colour variation in the petals, variation in the size of the flower head itself. Flowers are indifferent to us. They're beautiful anyway, and I'm really at the mercy of them and their season and when they're ready. So here I've got Japanese maple, which is just starting to unfurl. I've got really gorgeous scented narcissi and tulips. I've also got cherry blossom nestled in here, which also has that sort of rust colour, which is speaking to the Japanese maple. I've got bluebells and perennial cornflower and some dancing ranunculus as well. All a celebration of this moment in the garden.
Now, still to come on today's programme. We explore a garden that offers a sanctuary to individuals recovering from life-changing surgery.
We have paths that are uneven in surface with different cambers, gravel and bark to walk on. It really is a kind of a stepping stone to getting them back to normality, really.
And Rachel looks at the extraordinary ways that plants can communicate with pollinators.
Different colours tells the pollinator whether that flower has been visited or not. So it goes from yellow to pink after pollination. It means the pollinators don't waste time. There's no nectar in there and they don't need pollinating. It's coding, basically.
Very clear instructions.
Yeah.
Cutting hedges can be hard work, but when the hedge is rich with fragrance, it can also be a delight.
This lavender has now finished flowering, so I'm cutting it back to allow a little bit of regrowth before winter comes, because if you leave it too late, the regrowth is soft and more prone to being damaged by frost. When you're pruning lavender, if you cut back to old wood, it may not regenerate. So even if it's very overgrown, just make sure there's some growth beneath the cut. And that's a very good reason to cut regularly, because if you leave it and then only cut it back every few years, you're going to get a lot of dead stems at the base of the plant. So I'm just trimming this back like this. There's a little bit of a hole in there, which looks like a dog, Ned, has chased a ball in there and rolled about a bit. Okay, so be it.
Last summer, we visited a garden attached to a London hospital that provides a vital aspect of rehabilitation to patients recovering from amputation.
tranquility, peace. It's brought all those things to me.
This garden helped me heal.
This garden for me is a place to just relax and forget you're in hospital.
This unit really supports patients who've experienced an amputation to get back onto the road to recovery, to regain their independence. And this garden really plays a really important role in them being able to do that. This is the Amputee Rehabilitation Unit, which is part of Guy's and St Thomas's Trust. It's in Lambeth, South London. I'm Joe Scoble, and I'm the head gardener here, but I also work as a rehabilitation assistant as well. Let me help you with that.
Thank you.
Yeah. If you've experienced an amputation, it's a life-changing event. It can obviously have an effect on your mental health. Right, are you happy?
Yeah, I'm comfortable
Should we
now.
put you on a slight angle like that? Is that okay? When you come out into the garden, you notice that people relax. They can practice with their wheelchair outside, they can practice with their prosthetic. It's important for someone's mood. We've got some different paths here that are set up especially for training with a prosthesis. So we have paths that are uneven in surface with different cambers, gravel and bark to walk on. It really is a kind of a stepping stone to getting them back to normality, really.
I use my imagination to create this beautiful design here. Thumbs up. My name is Tatiana. My passion is dancing, so dancing kizomba, which is an African dance from Angola in Africa. And I went there because I wanted to improve myself, and I unfortunately contracted severe malaria. To save my life, they had to amputate my arms and my legs. I'm a very positive person, so that didn't scare me much, really. I just wanted to get on my life and try to figure out how I can dance again. When I arrived here, everything changed on the first day. From being not being able to move to finally being able to move, it was amazing. It's a great feeling. Yeah, just being outside the garden was really something peaceful and something to get your mind out of your own room and then what happened to you. It was just a feeling of freedom.
So we have plants from all around the world here, and they are plants that can cope with the quite dry, hot environment of London. This is a Mexican lily, which has a really interesting large flower that comes up in the spring, which develops on the mature plant. We've got the rice paper plant, the Tetrapanax. We got this large Miscanthus giganteum. We got plants such as this one here, which is the Octavia carnea, which is from the slopes of the Andes. The Australian indigo just behind us. You've got the lancewood from New Zealand, quite unusual looking trees. So we've got plants that perhaps you wouldn't normally see in people's gardens. That's fine.
Yeah.
What we've come to realise is that you can take rehabilitation out into the garden using hand tools in the garden. We perhaps take it for granted, but somebody who's just learning to use a prosthesis and is maintaining their balance has to think about what they're doing a little bit more carefully. So these tasks really help them to really progress with their balance and their confidence. Big or small?
I reckon the Big Daddy. Let's go with
Daddy.
that. Yeah. My name's Luke. I've been here about 6 weeks now. I was on a motorbike trip driving from the US down to Antarctica. Unfortunately, only made it as far as Colombia, where I crashed. Was there for about a month in hospital and then was repatriated back to England. Arrived in this oasis. Do you put your foot on it?
I would just use your strength if you can. Shove it in hard and then lift.
It's just so different to being in a hospital bed to coming in here. It's just nice that it's separate. That's what's important. I've had my leg for about 2 weeks, and the first week was pretty savage, trying to get used to walking on it, and now I feel like I've got a bit of independence back. It's much harder to walk on this soil than it is on normal ground, but I think it's quite good for the balance. If you can walk on soil, I reckon you can have a good go on the London path. Right, this is where I fall in the ditch.
Don't fall in the ditch.
Being out in the garden, I get used to actually hobbling around on my leg and working out how to go up things and down things, and when something throws me off balance, I can come back to the centre. So it's incredibly useful. Do you know what, this is the best physio session I've had. Trying to stand up, do it with the rake.
Right, we've got sage. These two are mint, Corsican mint, and then we're going to plant mint up there. My name's Christine. I came to the centre after having my leg amputated about 4 months ago now. I had a bypass in my leg because the arteries were furred up. I was very depressed, cried every time someone spoke to me because it is overwhelming. You know, even now I sort of it's just peaceful to sit out here. You collect your mind. You feel a bit calmer when you go in, you know. Hopefully, I'm going home next week. So, but I won't. Well, I'll miss him and I'll miss the garden. Yeah.
The sunlight is so important, isn't it, for our immune system? And so bringing patients out into the open and to enjoy the outdoor space, I think that's really important when it comes to the future of providing healthcare.
Taking care of the garden gave me a sense of having my independence back, and it's a start of my life really, because I stayed in here for 6 months, and after that it's like being outside, like in a real world, we'd say. And then yeah, being ready to have my own little garden. When I'm taking care of my plant, I just forget about things. I just forget about the world around me. I just want to be there with them, and I love it. I'm so grateful to be able to do that, and it's nice.
Most of us have experienced the power of gardens to heal, but to see how profoundly important they can be in such a life-changing situation, I find deeply moving and inspiring.
Here we've got courgettes and squashes, which, given rich soil, given a fairly mild climate and plenty of water, have gone bonkers. Look at this. Look at this here. Now, that's rooted in the ground, but that is just one tendril growing off and, of course, laden with fruit. Too many. Now, if I take that off, and that off there, and this is tromboncino, and they're meant to be curved like this, and when they're ripe, they're yellow, but they're perfectly edible green. As with all courgettes, they can be eaten small, but at this stage of the year, you don't want masses of new fruit. You want the existing fruit to do well. So I'm going to cut back How about that? Tromboncino. And because they're hanging, of course, they're straight, they are extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary, but delicious, I might say. These are courgettes, and you eat them like you'd eat any other courgette. They're just very big and quite odd. I've got 3 rows here of pumpkins and squashes, and what they need more than anything is exposure to light. This is a squash called Musc de Provence.
And you can see it's beginning to form ribs. These ribs will develop much more. They'll be almost like segments of an orange. And the final colour, if it's fully ripe, will be almost a kind of russety brown with a touch of blue coming through, and the flesh is a rich, deep orange. It's absolutely delicious. It looks fantastic. And it's far better to put the energy of the plant and the energy of the sunlight into producing one decent fruit than half a dozen small ones that don't fully ripen. So be ruthless. There's an enormous amount of growth. And here's a good example that you've got flowers appearing, and flowers will go on appearing for the next month or so, but that will not make a fruit. It's too late. Focus your attention on what you've got, which has a chance to grow and ripen. Keep them well watered, get them as much sunshine as you possibly can, which means cutting off any shading foliage, and then we'll think about harvesting them as we go into October. Of course, for every flower to produce a fruit or a seed, it needs a pollinator, and most of them, that involves insects. But it's not just the insect going to the plant and taking what it needs. To quite a surprising extent, the plant entices and controls the insect on how it operates. And Rachel went to Bristol to find out more.
Flowers. We pack our borders with them and revel in their shapes and colours. As gardeners, we know that plants aren't really flowering for us. They're doing it to attract insects, get pollinated and ensure the next generation of plants. But we can't help loving them anyway. And we could love them more. Because, thanks to science, we're learning more about the incredible adaptations that plants have made in order to draw those pollinators in. They include anti-slip petals, heat mats, and turbo-boosted nectar. And that's just for starters. Flowering plants and bees have a long history. They've evolved alongside each other for more than 70 million years, ensuring they both get what they need. For bees, the main priority is food, finding nectar to fuel them and pollen to feed their young. For flowering plants, that means guaranteeing pollination, whether it's sunny, shady, or there's a wind blowing. And that their pollen is carried to flowers of the same species, rather than some far-flung tree. Professor Jane Memmott is a director here at Bristol Botanic Gardens and a pollinator expert at the university. Although there's a huge range of pollinators, most research is on how clever flowers and clever bees work together.
Look here, Jane, at this teucrium, absolutely smothered in bees.
It most certainly is, isn't it?
How important is memory for bees in terms of finding forage?
It's really important. These are fairly short-lived individuals, so they come out the nest as blank slates, basically. So they have to learn really fast what plants are out, how much rewards they are, where they are, and things like that. And so they learn both from their nestmates and other bees. And also the plants will train them to a certain extent as well. They're smart bees, they really are. They're very good at being bees, which is quite simple, but a sophisticated little insect, yes, basically.
Some of the plants that train bees are very familiar.
For this foxglove, for example, what exactly is going on there?
Well, if you stand next to a foxglove and watch what the bees are doing, they will nearly always start at the bottom of this column of flowers. And that bee knows there's more rewards, there's more nectar in that bottom flower than at the top. So it'll start at the bottom and work its way up. And the reason the plant is offering that differential reward is that it wants the bee to come in from another plant with pollen, because these are ready for pollination at the bottom, whereas at the top they're producing pollen. It wants that pollen to be taken somewhere else. So it gives it the big reward at the bottom, it works its way up, it's got all its calories, and then it leaves to cross-pollinate another plant. It really is kind of training those pollinators.
But how do you know that there's more nectar at the bottom of the flowers to the top?
There's a really fun experiment to do in the garden with your kids or with friends or whatever. You can just use your coffee filter papers for this, and if you cut it into a little wedge-shaped section, and if you poke that into the flowers at the bottom, the nectar gets absorbed by that wick, and you can kind of, with a pen, mark how far the nectar's gone down. If you do that at the top, you'll find there's much less nectar up there.
You can see that it works because here, lower down, you've got all these nicely developing seed pods. Up here, still got to be pollinated.
To keep their pollinator customers fed and loyal, some flowers have worked out ways to show when individual blooms have been pollinated and their nectar stores are empty.
I've always been intrigued by this sort of flower head in different colours. So what's going on there?
The different colours tells the pollinator whether that flower has been visited or not. So it goes from yellow to pink after pollination. It means the pollinators don't waste time. There's no nectar in there and they don't need pollinating. It's coding, basically.
Very clear instructions.
Yeah.
When forget-me-nots have been pollinated, their centres change from yellow to white. Some flowers, like lemon, have caffeine in their nectar to help the bees remember them more clearly. And then there's petal power. Although bees see colours differently, flowers use bright petals to make themselves visible, and some have added ways to make the blooms more bee-friendly. And they do that using colour, texture, and more surprisingly, heat. Associate Professor Heather Whitney is a plant scientist at Bristol University, specialising in pollination.
Tell me about plants and temperature.
Well, the flowers are often warmer than the leaves, and we think we might know why that is. Flowers need to be at the right temperature to help their pollen and their ovules develop, but being slightly warmer also acts as an extra reward for their pollinators. So most of those pollinators, like bees, are not warm-blooded like us. So usually for a bee to fly, it needs to warm itself up. It can do this by basically vibrating its wing muscles a bit, which sort of like generates a bit of heat, but that uses energy. So if it can get that heat from a warm flower, that actually acts as an extra reward for the bee and can give it the extra energy to fly off to the next flower.
So clever.
And thanks to camera technology, we can not only see the heat, but how the flower positions it.
You can see, first of all, that the flowers are a different temperature to the surrounding leaves. So they're a paler yellow, so that shows that they're warmer. But what you can also see is that there are patterns of temperature. So towards the centre of each of these flowers, almost sort of a glowing white hot yellow, and that shows that the centre of the flower is a lot warmer than the rest of the flower.
There's a dramatic difference, isn't there, between the outer part of the petals and where it converges towards the centre of the flower.
That's exactly right. So the temperature acts both as a reward, somewhere warm to sit, the nectar gets warmer, like having a nice hot cup of tea on a cold day, but it also acts as a guide. Going towards the warm centre helps provide the bee with information about where the reward is.
Extraordinary that we can't see that, but the flower's doing all that work to draw the pollinators in.
Absolutely, there's this hidden world of communication between flowers and their pollinators, and this hidden world is all around us.
It's thought flowers create heat in several ways. Some use their shape to focus the sun into their centres, and some, because darker colours absorb more light and get warmer, become darker, using special tiny cells on their petals.
For example, this velvety texture on a rose petal is caused by the cells on the petal surface, which are sort of this cone shape. And that cone shape actually helps focus the light of the sun into the middle of the cell, where you have the vacuole containing all the pigments. More of the light is then absorbed by the pigments, you get a deeper colour as well, and also that temperature effect.
It's extraordinary.
And up close, in colour, Those cones shine like jewels. But these cones aren't just making flowers more colourful and warm.
What we found is that having conical cells on a flower really helps the insect grip onto the flower. So if you think about a climbing wall, you've got sort of hand-sized grips. That conical shaped cell is actually about the same size as an insect foot. So it's almost like a climbing wall on flowers.
That is extraordinary, this idea that the actual physical shape of those tiny things we can't even see are helping the insect to negotiate its way around the flower. It's so clever. Looking at the plants in this beautiful border, I feel I have gained a whole new level of respect. I'm already so inspired by the plants, the pollinators in my own garden, but having seen the science, I know that those plants are imbued with an innate cleverness that is really mind-blowing.
What strikes me watching that is not just how incredible that is and how extraordinary, but also how little we know. What else is there to be discovered? Absolutely wonderful.
But what we do know is that all life in our garden is interconnected. Plants, insects, wildlife, the soil, they all depend on each other.
By setting up your garden to encourage as much diversity of wildlife as possible, the better balance it has. And the better balance it has, the healthier it is. And everybody benefits. This little area, which we call the wildlife garden, I've deliberately tried to create just that. As much diversity within a small space as I can and keep it looking good. And certainly at the moment, it's doing just that. So we've got a pond and there are frogs sitting on the logs in front of me and water beetles. And of course, that whole host of sub-aqua life that you don't see, but it's really important. And so it's beautiful, but it's really working for insects. And for the birds, we've got trees and shrubs and hedges so they can nest, and it's safe for them. And I do feel that if you can create a garden that is really rich for wildlife, it's going to be good for you. Just sitting in a garden, enjoying it in its entirety, is my idea of happiness. Come on. You going to come and sit down? Come on, you come up here. Good boy. Come and sit down. Well, that's it for today. I'll see you back here at Longmeadow next time. So until then, bye-bye.